Welcome. Especially welcome to the attendees that have taken time in order to be with me right now. And of course, to all the people who registered for this webinar. Welcome, Paul, too. Today, I will help you know about what writing reflectively means and how you can integrate it into your learning toolbox. I like to use that term, toolbox, because it's something that you have on hand, ready to be used if you can incorporate it into your way of learning and the way of acting, okay? Thank you, Paul, for your greetings from Dublin, and welcome SP and Donald. Okay, now this is a different quote, but I think it's very relevant for what we are going to talk about today. If you have, you are a fan of Harry Potter, or at least you have read the books and watched the films, you will recognize that object, pensieve, okay? And this quote reminds us how we feel when reflective and critical thinking and writing are demands to fulfill. How we feel when professors tell us you have to be reflective and you have to be critical. Too many thoughts and memories crammed into our minds, and we wish for a tool to help us find patterns and relationships. So we are looking for a pensieve. A concrete version of at least one of the tools you can use to achieve that is what I will present today, and that you can also find in the webinars about critical writing that I have conducted at DoctoralNet. Okay? So this is the agenda to begin discovering our own version of Potter and Dumbledore's pensieve. We will begin with reflective thinking as the starting point of reflective writing, and then we'll go into the analysis of the latter. Finally, I will give some guidelines to perform reflective writing. Hope you find this webinar useful, not only to your academic work, but also to your life. And you may think, oh, she is very ambitious. Yes, I am, because helping students be reflective and independent thinkers is the ultimate goal of any teacher. Okay? So reflective writing is not something that comes from nowhere. It has a precursor, reflective thinking. You cannot write effectively without having thought about the topic and the ideas you want to communicate first. It should be the usual process for every action of our life, but unfortunately, it is not always a precursor of our action. Usually, we don't take enough time to reflect upon what we are dealing with. Welcome, Praveen. Therefore, you need to reflect if your goal is to write high quality text. You want quality text? Then you have to reflect about what you want to communicate. In fact, it is a requirement any academic work supposes, or at least it should be. The more and deeper you reflect upon you are dealing with, the better the product of the process. Besides, learning is also a product of reflection. Why? Learning is the process of acquiring new or modifying existing knowledge, behavior, skills, values, or preferences. And that implies having experiences that relate what you want to learn to your own previous learning. In other words, you have to connect new things to previous ones to make them meaningful. And that process is more effective when you are able to look for ways to relate them. Something that is produced when you reflect upon what you intend to understand and incorporate to your schema, your mental schema. And these are the reasons why you need to master reflection. As you can see, all of them are tasks you have to perform daily and not only at academic context. Reflective thinking and critical thinking are often used synonymously. Reflective thinking is a part of the critical thinking process, referring specifically to the processes of analyzing and making judgment about what has happened. Dewey suggests that reflective thinking is an active, persistent, and careful consideration of a belief or supposed form of knowledge, of the grounds that support that knowledge and the further conclusions to which that knowledge leads. Learners are aware of and control their learning by actively participating in reflective thinking. In other words, assessing what they know, what they need to know, and how they bridge that gap during learning situations. Welcome, Catherine. So reflection and thinking are intimately related processes, and improving one of them impacts the other. So it is in fact an action with dual benefits. Consequently, your thinking process looks like the one in this slide. It begins with you thinking about experiences that are related to you or things you are interested in. Don't worry, Catherine, you are always welcome. Don't think that you are late. That reflection cannot be done in isolation, and that's important. It is influenced by your own assumptions, values, beliefs, and attitudes. That framework guides your reflection and determines how you interpret ideas and situations, solve problems, select and implement changes, justify actions, etc. So when you draw a conclusion about an idea or a situation, it is in fact an evaluation or judgment. At that moment, you are performing critical thinking. The appropriateness and validity of such judgment will depend on the kind of evidence you can provide to support it. But it is a judgment and an example of being critical. Reflective thinking and critical thinking are often used as synonymous, but reflective thinking is a part that refer, and I say again, specifically to the process of analyzing and making judgment. Being reflection so important, you may ask, how do I perform it? And here you have an approach to help you perform reflection. It consists of 4 stages which go from acknowledging a situation, making a connection to it, explaining it in terms you can make sense of your perception or understanding, 2, reconstructing it so as to integrate it into your toolbox. In other words, making it meaningful for you. One aspect of this approach that is valuable for students is that it provides you examples of the questions you may ask in order to understand and apprehend what you are dealing with. So it's not only a presentation of the stages that you may find in the reflection process, but also that it gives you questions that you can use in order to start each one of those stages. And this reflective learning cycle is interactive. Okay, so we have already seen the process of reflection, and now we are putting together into learning. Okay, so it doesn't stop after one rotation. You apply what you learn, then continue to reflect and develop further. In other words, you plan, act, observe, reflect, and you do it again and again and again in order to make your process more effective. Now, there's a plan. It is based on the wider context, theory, models of knowledge and practice, previous experience, etc. Think carefully about how others have performed similar tasks and use this understanding to develop, modify, change, adapt, and then formulate an action plan for the situation you are expected to encounter. Act. You apply the method or approaches developed in the plan within the situation that you are dealing with. You maintain self-awareness. You are prepared to creatively adapt and change goals so as you go along while keeping your plan in mind. You observe. As soon as possible, you review the session and your observation of what happened, the effect of the situation, and on your, not only on the situation, but also on yourself. You produce an accurate and objective description of the event. And you reflect. Reflect upon and evaluate the session and your actions. Analyze your own experience of what you did and how you did it. In other words, you use metacognitive processes. Reflect on the strengths and weaknesses of your action. Identify problems and issues for investigation. Develop your insight. And there is no correct answer, and some things may remain difficult to interpret. Did you achieve your plan? Did your goals change? How did your action affect the situation? And how did the situation affect you? How do your observations fit with the theories you have read? And you plan again, and the cycles begin. So, when you want to learn something, it's not just a matter of learning it by heart. You need to reflect upon what you are trying to learn. And this could be a very effective way of approaching that process, because you are able to perform some actions. You plan, you act, you observe, you reflect, and you begin the process again. Formulate a new action plan based on your experience in the previous situation or session. And that is really learning, when you are able to create, to implement your learning in other contexts. You use the outcomes of your reflection, rethinking and reinterpreting. You include the wider context of theory, models of knowledge, and practice. And you act again, and so on. And this is a very effective approach to reflect and learn. I suggest you try it. Reflective thinking is essential for success in unpredictable and complex situations. Reflective thinking helps you to develop a questioning attitude and new perspectives, identify areas for change and improvement, respond effectively to new challenges, generalize and apply what you have learned from one situation to other situations. You may be asked to think reflectively at university when completing assignments that draw on your experience in placement or prior employment, or when considering your own skills and experience and where you might need to develop. For career learning or academic development, for instance. Being able to think reflectively is an important transferable skill. that will help you to showcase your achievement, for instance, at job interviews, and it's also worth mentioning in its own right. So, in order to improve your learning, you need to think reflectively, and that will help you transfer learnings from one area to another area. And that's something that is very valuable, not only in academic context, but also, and I think sometimes mainly, on work environments. You know that the University of Reading has summarized in a very effective way what you have to do in order to develop your ability to think reflectively. And this adds to the reflective learning cycle presented before. Please be aware of how important questioning is for reflective thinking and also reflective writing, as you will see in some minutes. Here you have some guidelines that you can use in order to develop the ability to think reflectively in such a way that it can be integrated into you and be part of the way that you approach things. Not only, I said again, not only at academic context, but also in daily life. Okay, and if you can see, there are lots of questioning, because thinking reflectively implies questioning. You have to ask questions in order to know if you are understanding and if you can find things that are necessary. Welcome, Dariela. Good, and it's good evening for you. It's good morning for us. Okay, so, and we have reached the connection between two reflective processes. Reflective thinking precedes reflective writing. You cannot write reflectively unless you have thought deeply about what you want to say first. That process makes reflection a prerequisite to reflective writing, and at the same time characterizes the latter as a product of the interrelationship between ideas, situation, concepts on one side, values, beliefs, attitudes on another, and evidence on a third side, with reflection as the connecting matter. So, it's time to talk about reflective writing, its nature and stages. Writing emerges from thinking. Therefore, you need to think reflexively to write reflectively. And that implies that a piece of reflective writing must reflect the threefold process we mentioned before: ideas, situations, concepts on one side, values, beliefs, attitudes on another, and evidence on a third side, with reflection as the connected matter. It's like the dark matter of space that connect all universes. Now here you have a definition of what reflective writing is. This definition emphasizes its iterative nature. It is not limited to present information in isolation, but connected to other elements of a situation and interpret it in terms of its impact and meaningfulness. But what it is and what it is not. Here you have what reflective writing is. As you can see, it is based upon high-order thinking. You are expected to make claims, of course, but also analyze and evaluate them to build new knowledge and support its validity. Be aware of the process, its strengths and weaknesses, as well as be able to apply that knowledge to new context. You must reflect, analyze, and evaluate to finally interpret and apply. Complex tasks, in fact, but all of them are reachable if you are conscious of what you are expected to do. So they are complex things, yes, but you can learn them if you are able, or if you work to understand them and practice them. Sorry, I'm going to take some water. And this is what reflective writing is not. Yes, Patty, I have already posted the whole presentation under the handouts tab. So you can open that tab right now and download it. So don't worry. Besides that, you are going to receive the link for the recording. Okay. Okay. What reflective writing is not? This text that you see in the slide do not suppose analysis. Okay, they don't suppose analysis. Just wait a minute there. Okay. Sorry, I have some problems here with something that came that shouldn't came. Okay, now. When you read this task, you see that they do not suppose analysis, interpretation, or application to new and complex situations. They relate to a lower level of writing, which, being based on description, is useful, of course, but for some situations and stages of the writing process, but not to more demanded academic work. Yes, descriptions are useful, but they are limited. And here you have a chart, a table, in fact, that summarizes the different stages you have to fulfill in order to write reflective text. As you can see, they go from the basic descriptive stage, focus on knowing what elements are present in the situation you want to write about, to the inclusion of your reaction to it and the evaluation and analysis of its impact, coherence, and meaningfulness. Those stages take you to the state of making conclusions in the general and specific related areas to finish the whole process with a call for action. And all these stages should be reflected in your writing. So you have there the stages, and what is more important, what they refer to. And again, we have questions that lead you to reflect. For instance, when you are describing the situation, you have to ask yourself, what is the stimulant for reflection? Is an incident, an event, a theoretical idea? And you have, what are you going to reflect on? And then you introduce your feelings. What were your reactions and feelings? What was good and bad about the experience? You make value judgment and so on, okay? And it ends with personal action plans, because you have to ask, what are you going to do differently in this type of situation next time? And when you can answer that question, you are in fact demonstrating that you have learned, okay? But how can you write reflectively? Let's see some guidelines for that. Just ask, is there a source document that the slide is based on reflective writing is? This one. Well, in fact, what reflective writing is and what it is not, I I analyze different sources. Some of them are in the references that I have included here because I have mentioned them. And then I did this summary for you. Okay. So, because it concerns your thoughts, reflective writing is basically subjective. And therefore, in addition to being reflective and logical, you can be personal, hypothetical, critical, and creative. You can comment about your experiences rather than solely drawing on academic evidence. And I'm going to talk about that, but it is a slight difference between reflective writing and critical writing, which is always very, very supported by strong arguments. When you are reflecting, you include personal feelings and you include some things that are related to you as a person and to you as a professional. It includes description, what, when, who, and analysis, how, why, what if. It is a reflective task that may allow you to use different modes of writing and language like the one presented in the slide. You can use descriptive language and analytical and explanatory and expressive one. It is advisable that you use full sentences and complete paragraph for your reflections. Reflective writing is often less formal than other forms of academic writing because you can usually use personal pronouns like I, my, or we, but keep colloquial language to a minimum. I mean, it is a little less formal than academic writing, but it is not informal language. You can discuss points like your perception of the content, any question you may have, experiences, ideas, and observation you have had, and how they relate to the topic, what you found confusing, inspiring, difficult, interesting, and why, possibilities, speculation, hypotheses, or solutions, alternative interpretation or different perspectives of what you have read or done, how new ideas challenge what you already know, what you need to explore next in terms of thoughts and actions. You can also discuss how you solve a problem, reach a conclusion, found an answer, or reach a point of understanding. It's also helpful to make comparisons and connections between what you are learning and your prior knowledge and experience and your prior assumptions too. In fact, by the way, I'm going to post the transcript of this presentation because I know that it is a little complex to have all those things in your mind just by hearing it. Or by listening to it. I'm going to give you that too. Patty said, is there a particular part of your thesis where reflective writing sits best? Find it? To tell you the truth, my dear, it has to be seen throughout the whole dissertation or thesis. However, I think that I'm not quite sure if it's finding, but sure that is when you discuss your findings. And if you are developing qualitative approach or a mixed methods approach, you are more allowed to use reflective writing than a critical writing only. Okay, and this slide presents the 3 steps you may follow in order to write a reflective text. Of course, this option is one in many. I present it here so you can have an idea about how to develop the writing process. You need to be clear about what you are expected to do, assure the format you should use to present your piece of writing, and organize your ideas. You can see in the slide that there are 3 squares. Well, they are not squares. They are, in fact, rectangles. Okay, that are in a darker color and have a number of each of the steps. And then the other rectangles presented what you are expected to do there. So the suggested course of action talks about a mind map. If you look at the first rectangle after gather your ideas, it talks about drawing up a mind map. But you can use any organizer you feel comfortable with. By the way, I conducted a webinar about organizing your ideas to write academic text that you can find in the resources pages that Doctoral Net has for your university. And there I talk about not only mind map, but concept maps, but also outlines and different ways of organizing your ideas. So I think that you can then analyze these steps and then adapt them to your own way of learning and your own way of thinking. And this slide presents what you're expected to include in a reflective reading text. This list illustrates what was in the table of the reflective stages or reflective writing presented in the previous one. Okay, so when you write reflectively, you are expected to describe, to include your reactions and feeling, to make judgment, to support your analysis and link that analysis to other contexts, and make your conclusion and formulate your own your own action plan. And these are some of the reasons why developing your ability to write reflectively is important for you. All of them help you be successful in your academic work and especially build a solid basis for critical writing that is a main requirement of a thesis or dissertation. Evaluate the significance of each one of them and decide to master reflection as the core of your academic work. That's my suggestion, okay? So if you want to make critical analysis, not only because you want it, but because you are required to do that, you need first to make reflective thinking and even reflective writing, okay? And when you practice that, it helps you to create connection between what you know, already know, or when you are trying to know, to connect theory to practice, and to connect how to do things and why to do them in that way. It also helps you be conscious of your learning process because you have to ask yourself questions during the whole process so you can easily detect when you are understanding and when you are confused, and then try to make things better. And you will be able to identify gaps of knowledge, not only on your own knowledge, but also in the knowledge of the field of study. And you will get used to ask questions and also answer them. And that means that you will be able to deepen knowledge of your own strengths and weaknesses, and also of the strengths and weaknesses of what you are reading. And at the end when you get used to this, you become efficient, active, and critical. 3 elements of what a scholar is. And remember that you are in the process of becoming a scholar. And this is an example of reflective writing in social science, specifically in the method section of a fieldwork report. I suggest that when you download the presentation, you read it reflectively and determine the validity of each of the points colored. Okay, so you look for the description or the explanation of a method, and you reflect upon why is that a description, why it includes discipline-specific language, why there is critical evaluation of method there, and why there is a conclusion and recommendation that is based on the writer experience. And here you have another example, but in the engineering field of a study. Once again, when you download this presentation, read it carefully and try to understand why it addresses the assignment question, because there is a question there. And if it reflects on dieting experiences, why it has a direct reference to the course activity, and if the style is relatively informal, yet still uses full sentences. As I told you before, you're allowed to be a little informal, okay? And why it related what was learned. So when you write this kind of text as a precursor of what you have to do later on, which is critical analysis, this will help you a lot. And in summary, you may follow these guidelines in order to master reflective writing. And of course, practice is a decisive step to succeed. You have to embrace it if you want to be successful, because you have to do reflection, yes, but it has to be a purposeful reflection. You have to define what are you going to reflect upon. And you need also to write as many reflective texts as possible so you get used to that. And you have to get used to think of alternative courses of action, because there is not just one answer to each situation. And you have to take into account different people's point of view for the same reflection. And that open your mind to new ideas, to new elements, and to evaluate how valid your own point of view is and how it compares to other people's points of view. And it also gets used to include the ethical, historical, and socio-political context, because no situation is in isolation. It emerges from somewhere. And the more you understand the context into which it emerges, the better for your analysis. And of course, you have to practice, practice, and practice. And to finish this presentation, let me point out that there is a link between reflective writing and critical writing, and that both of them are important because reflection is part of both of them and of any meaningful academic work. Therefore, you need to master them, and you can do it if you invest time to understand and practice them. Okay? No academic work at the level in which you are, graduate level, can be done without reflection, without reflective thinking. And writing has to reflect that thinking. And later on, it has to reflect critical or criticism based on that reflective task. Here you have the references of today, the ones that I have mentioned, and that's why they are references and not bibliography. And also, I want to remember you about actions and things that you can do a doctoral and master's net during this summer. Here you have a lot of things that are ready for you and that you can take advantage of. And also, here you can get a list of webinars that includes the webinars that I have mentioned before about organizing your ideas for writing or about critical thinking and critical writing. Okay, Paul asked, should you relate your reflective writing back to more critical academic works, experience, etc., to ground it in more than my subjective thought? I know you mentioned it, but just wondering if you might comment. Thanks for the excellent talk. Yes, dear. I mean, any academic work, as I said before, is related to reflection, but also you have to support your points of view. So when you reflect, you create an argument. You create a claim that is the product of your reflective process. But that claim has to be supported by what? By previous analysis, by evidence that can be facts, that can be the results of other research experiences, and they can be based on different theories. So any academic work is a product of reflection, but also of supporting points of view. And remember that I think that nearly none idea is absolutely and pure new, because human knowledge is created upon previous human knowledge. So you always have to refer to past experiences, to past analysis, and to past works. Josh says, okay, I'm glad that my answer has satisfied you, Paul. Josh, is it safe to say that any professional evaluation process would be reflective? Is reflective writing a component of transformative learning as critical reflection is? Well, let me answer the first one. Is it safe to say that any professional evaluation process would be reflective? I would say that yes, because if it is not reflective, how can you be sure that you are taking into account all the variables involved? Has any other person lost sound? Oh, Christy can hear me. So, Annalyn, it seems, is on your side. Okay. Okay. So it was only Annalyn. Okay. So let's go back. When you evaluate something, that evaluation has to be based upon reflection. Why? Because you have to take the claim that has been done and analyze if It is valid if it has enough evidence to support the point, and all those tasks are in fact reflective tasks. Okay. Now the second question of Josh is reflective writing a component of transformative learning as critical reflection is? I think that reflective writing is a component of that transformative learning, especially for people who are visual learners and also, I would say, hand-on learners, okay? Why? Because that writing is the product of the process of reflection, and in that sense, it is the basis for critical analysis, which is based on critical reflection. I mean, there is an intimate relationship between being reflexive and being critical. Is critical analysis a component of reflective writing then? It is a higher stage of reflective writing. Okay? There are different points of view in relation to that. For some scholars, reflective writing is at a higher degree than critical writing. For others, is the other way around. What is important is that both of them are, in fact, interdependent. They are intimately connected. Okay? And you cannot do reflective writing without reflective thinking, and you cannot do critical analysis without reflective thinking. Okay? Any other question? Nope. Yep. Okay. We can continue, but let me stop the recording because we don't know exactly how much time we will take to do this. Oh, there is another question. Let me answer that before stopping the recording. Can reflective writing be used as a tool to evaluate your reflective thinking skills? Oh, yes, I think it can be used in that way. Why? Because if you cannot write about what you are dealing with, then it means that you have not think reflectively enough to do that, and that you have not reached the level of understanding that you need to be reflective and to create an academic text. It is related to the idea that you cannot write about what you cannot understand. So if you cannot write reflectively, it means that you have not done a very good reflective process. Adrian, I haven't seen you, my dear. Okay, Adrian asks, depends on how critical or how deep our reflection is, I suppose. Yes, of course, any reflection, as practically anything, have different degrees. And what degree you achieve depend on, first, on what expectations have been stated for your work, and also how much you master the reflective ability. Okay. Vina says, it was wonderful to see how it can be used effectively in analysis of dissertation, thesis, etc. Yes, these concepts that we have talked about today are essential for dissertation, thesis, reports, and all those things, because all of them are based on reflection. You need to know how to reflect upon situations that you are dealing with in order to satisfy the expectations that are behind a thesis, behind a dissertation or a report. In fact, any academic work. Okay. Let me stop the recording then. Thank you very much for all the people who registered for this webinar, and especially for our attendees. See you in August with another webinar. In that case, the first one, I'm going to talk how you can go from an idea to develop a dissertation to the dissertation itself. Very envisioned of me. Bye. Okay, let's